This is the review. The review is Bus. Bus, we played the 20th anniversary edition, which just came out and is practically sold out. This is what spotters do. They don't print enough games, they sell out, and then people are selling them on eBay for $500. Bus was originally designed in 1999, and the designers are Jeroen Duman and Joris Viersinga. The artists were primarily, there are a bunch of artists because the game actually comes with the old art and the new art. The artists primarily were Herman Havercourt and Tamara Yannick. The reason I mentioned those two in particular is that the original Splotter Spielen were the two designers, Jeroen and Joris, and the two artists, Herman and Tamara. That was the initial Splotter. They were college friends in Amsterdam, I believe. In 1997, they formed this gaming group, and they decided to start putting out games. They put out a bunch of small games, and then in 1999, 2 years later, they put out kind of their first two big games, which were Bus and Roads and Boats. And Roads and Boats in particular took off and really put them on the map. They were, Yerwin is a researcher for a cryptographic company, so he does mathematical research and things like that. Joris owns a company that does very, very simple games that are meant to be memory retention and rehabilitation for elderly people, which is, really kind of interesting. And for their entire career, they have made games at nights and on weekends in their garages. They've been coming up with these games and playing.
Where they keep their bicycles.
But yes, always have to have the bicycles.
Not cars.
It's such a fantastic country for biking. It's unbelievable. They made these games that are singular. There's no game quite like.
But also highly influential.
Tremendously influential. And yet they're influential, but nobody does what they do. They really don't. Every game they come out with feels so Splotter and never feels like anything
There's
else.
A purity to this game. It's a really spare, abstract, and simple game space, but a very rich decision space.
Very much so.
In my opinion. What is Bus about, Tom?
I'm about to tell you, Dimitri. Thank you for asking. Bus is a game. I would put this as, when we talked about puzzle games a moment ago, Bus is a puzzle game.
It is definitely that.
I could teach you Bus in 5 minutes. I could teach you all of the rules and everything you need to know to play Bus in 5 minutes.
The game actually does play in about 90.
Yes, that's correct. And yet, I think I could play this game every day for 3 years and not have plumbed half of its depth. It is an amazingly deep game. So when you think about that, I think of games like Ricochet Robots. I think of games like Fresh Fish. I think of games like Through the Desert, which essentially is multiplayer Go. So we're talking about Go in many ways. I think of games like Samurai. These are amazingly deep, puzzly games where you are staring at the board, looking at all these various options and things, and you're trying to figure out the right move. We are owners of bus lines in a small town. At the beginning of the game, we're going to put out 2 establishments. There are 3 types of establishments in the game.
Per person. Per player.
The establishments are homes, they are workplaces, and they are pubs.
Yes.
That's what you're going to put out. And there is a little wheel with a dial on it on the map, which is going to slowly rotate around. First, it's going to go to work.
Home.
Well, it starts on home.
Starts at home.
Goes to work, then goes to the pub, and then goes home again. The idea being that whatever that dial is pointed at, that's where the passengers that you could pick up on this bus line want to go next, right? If they were at home, they're going to want to go to work. If they were at work, they want to go to the pub. If they were at the pub, they're going to want to go home.
And if they're already in the place where home is, or pub is, or work is?
Let's get to that in a second.
Sure.
So you're absolutely right, but let's get to that in a second. You then will put out 2 bus lines. These are the little sticks that would be the roads in Catan, for instance.
Sure.
right? And you're going to
Differently
be
colored.
locking. Yes, you're going to be basically defining lines between these various roads, and all the roads meet at intersections. Intersections often have 3, 4, 5, 6 different
This is not a
roads.
grid. This is an old European town.
Correct. When the game starts, you're going to. This is the very first worker placement game ever. All the worker placement games that you have ever played, they owe their allegiance to Bus, to Splotter. They came up with the idea. And of course, being Splotter, they did it in a way that I have never, ever seen before. At the beginning of the game, you get 20 workers. That's all you have for the game. You will use each worker once and only once, which means when it is time for your worker placement, it is not like Agricola where you're going to put your 2 workers out and eventually earn a 3rd worker and then collect them back in.
There is no family growth, and every single worker is literally expendable.
Which means on a given turn, you must spend a minimum of 2 workers, but you can spend as many workers as you want.
And finish the game very early, which is something that this game shares with Tapestry. It's complete opposite.
It does have a different ending strategy. So some of the places you can go. One place you can go is you can extend your bus line. Your bus line will get longer. The first person to go there will be able to extend it by as many segments as the person who has the most buses. If somebody's got 3 buses and that's the most, then the person who goes to that space first is going to be able to place out 3 new extensions to their bus line.
The second person will be able to place out 2 extensions. The third person will be able to place out 1. But
in reverse order.
So the person who places the least will get to place first, which is the first of many, many meaty decisions that
may not be as clear as we think it is, so let's say it a different way. The last person to place their worker on the space is the first person to play their bus route on the board.
But the one who will get to place the least.
Correct. Exactly right. Very interesting. Second action is add another bus to your bus route.
Which only one person per turn can do.
And by doing so, you now can take another passenger when you take a vroom action, as we'll call it, because that's what they call it, which is when you transport passengers.
Vroom is a Dutch name for something. I believe vroom is a common last name.
Yes. The vrooms were Nazi sympathizers. I don't know why they added them into this game. It's very unfortunate. Next space you have people. There are 2 train stations in the game, and you can add people to the map. People that
to pick up and deliver.
For people to be picked up and delivered. And the game only starts with 4 people in your little town. So if you want to make any money at this rail line, at this bus line, you're going to have to get more people into town.
You need to connect to the station first, though.
You do not need to connect to station to put people in the station, but in order to utilize them, you will have to connect to the station for sure. The next space is buildings. Remember those buildings that we put out at the beginning of the game to start the game? Guess what? You can put out more and more and more. 3 types. You can put out any ones that you want. The spaces on the map will show you which intersection they are adjacent to, and they will be numbered 1 through 4. All 1 spaces must be covered before the 2 spaces, all 2 spaces before the 3, and so on and so forth.
And placing the buildings works just like extending your bus line, which is the person who places last.
Who places their worker last.
Will put the building down first, but only put down 1 building.
Correct. Then I'm going to skip the next one because it is trippy as heck. I will move on to vroom.
We're going to move up to vroom.
When you vroom in that order, so the first player to place there is the first person to do it. They are going to be able to move passengers to the building that they need to go to. The trick to this one is, and this is what I cut off DMITRY from saying earlier, DMITRY, what is the trick with this?
If the passenger already has their desired building next to them, they will go there and not have to use the bus. That's very intuitive, but it's very frustrating because you don't get to deliver them and you don't get to earn the point.
So you start with 4 passengers and 8 buildings on the map. if the building type that is needed is next to 3 of those 4 passengers, all of them are going to be turned face down from standing to laying down on top of those particular types of places, which means that not only do those passengers not need a bus ride,
but other people can't be delivered to those buildings, because not only can you only have one person per bus, you also can only have one person per building.
So you can already kind of imagine what we're talking about here, in that it becomes a very interesting logic puzzle very, very quickly, because you're trying to figure out, well, if they're going to this kind of building, those 3 are already out of it, and that building is the only one that's going to be available, so I have to get my bus line to connect to that building, and so on and so forth.
Tom, what's the only way to earn a point in this game, by the way?
By delivering a person to the building that they want to go to, you get 1 point.
And that's it.
That is it.
And an average good score in this game.
The board goes up to 20.
Which is a joke.
It goes up to 20 points. In our first game, somebody scored 8 points.
Let's give Trey credit.
We laughed at him. We thought how pathetic that the winning score was 8.
Trey won again tonight.
Do you want to know what the high score was in our second game?
Why don't you tell our
6.
listeners?
6. 6 points was the winning score. DMITRY had 5 to come in second.
Yeah, and last time I had 7 to come in second to Trey's 8.
I came in last both times. Dead last. Loved every minute of it. It is a phenomenal game.
There's a way to lose points too, isn't there? There's one way to
here
lose
we go.
points.
So we skipped over one thing. Splotter has a habit of doing some very funky things. They've got a sense of humor, these Dutch people. They put weird things in their game. Roads and Boats, which came out the exact same year, is a fantastic logistics puzzle where you're moving various items to various places. Among those items, there are ducks, right? There is a rule in the game where I'm trying to remember exactly what it is, but I believe it's something on the order of, if a duck and a piece of paper, or a duck and a donkey, something along those lines, if those are ever left in a space alone by themselves, they evaporate into a quantum state and disappear forever from the game. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially what it was is the designers realized that something that keeps happening because of the various combinations of items you want in various places. Lots of times there are ducks that are just wandering off by themselves, and so they made a rule that those ducks just poof, evaporate, and disappear from the game, forcing you to make harder and better decisions. They could have explained that a whole variety of different ways, but instead they decided to just put in a magical rule that does not go with anything else that has to do with that game. Well, guess what? Bus has the exact same thing. Bus has a time machine in the game. After you've placed your routes, after you've placed your buildings, after you've placed your new workers.
A time break.
Yes. There is a time manipulation device that they describe it as. They didn't need to do this, but this is what they said. There are 5 stones sitting on the device, and when one person and one person only goes to the space, they can decide whether or not they want to hold back time. In other words, the arrow is on home, which means it's about to move to work, meaning that all of these workers are going to want to go to work. If the person who chooses the time travel action takes a stone off of that space and chooses to use that action, the needle stays on home, meaning the workers want to go home. Those people want to go home. The problem is that most of these workers already are home, which means they're just going to fall down flat, and very little scoring is going to...
Into bed.
Not no scoring, but little scoring is going to go on, because a lot of these workers are going to be spoken for and already taken up. Taking this action, however, and taking that stone means -1 point at the end of the game. Did I mention that our high score this last game was 6 points? -1 point is a big deal, but it creates these situations where you start looking around the board, you start realizing what the next thing that's going to happen is, and you realize, oh, wow, Trey's going to score 5 points this round so far. Paul is going to score 4 points. I'm only scoring 1 point. I think I'm going to take the -1 and make it so that almost nobody scores anything.
Sure. And that's one of the ways to screw with your fellow players. Another way is to build a house or a bar or a workplace and an empty space right next to one of the people that they're planning to put on the bus. That's another way of taking a point from them.
Or if they're about to build something, guess what? Go later, build less things, but you build before they do, and put something undesirable in the location space that they're really counting on being able to build in.
Exactly.
This is a mean game.
This is a mean game, a very interactive game, and an AI game or a puzzle game, a very abstract game. Because here's what the game doesn't have that you would expect it to. Doesn't have any money.
Nope.
Doesn't have any resources.
Nope.
It doesn't have fuel costs.
Nope.
It doesn't have construction of bus stops.
Does not.
It doesn't have bus costs or maintenance costs for the buses that you have.
There is no economy. There's economy of movement and action. That's it.
No higher tickets for longer routes.
Yep.
And there is no randomness. There are no cards that come out. Every unpredictable thing in this game is due to the free will of your fellow players and how much they want to interfere with your grand schemes. For me, this is a beautiful illustration of kind of a seesaw effect that I like, which is I like player interaction in games that are abstract. Like this one.
Sure.
In games that are more narrative, in games that have more real-world elements, in games that cannot be played by an AI, I want less player interaction because I'm really into that narrative. And this is a beautiful example of a game that we're only pretending these are buses. We're only pretending these are buildings. We're only pretending these are passengers.
Got a pretty little bus as your start player. What do you mean you're only pretending?
What I mean is that I can't write an AI algorithm, but anybody, any Dutch person, because they're all great at math and computers, will be able to write an AI that would be able to play this game without having any understanding of what buses or people or pubs or homes or workplaces are in the real world. It is very much a pure math game. The only way to make them interesting is player interaction.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Their first big games were Bus and Roads and Boats, which are very crunchy, very puzzly games. Then they did 1830 BC, which was one of the games they love so much, is the 18XX series. Both of these guys absolutely love them. Euron more than Joris. And so they did their own take on an 1830 game where they did it in basically Babylon. Then came Antiquity, Indonesia, Duck Dealer, Greed Incorporated, Great Zimbabwe, Food Chain Magnate. They have gone from doing these very simple, very elegant, puzzly games to these more complex, bigger designs of games that still have a lot in common with their design philosophy. Like they're not. They don't do Baroque. They don't do big and convoluted. They don't have a lot of bells and whistles. Sometimes it takes a while to understand how to play the game. And, you know, a Food Chain Magnet and Indonesia, every time we play it, at the end of the game, everyone's like, you know what? I need to play this again within the next 3 weeks because I'm going to forget the things that I remembered now. And it's not about learning the game. You remember how to play the game. What it is it's learning the nuances of that the discoveries that happen in play. There is such depth. There's such a sort of a living experience of a game that is evolving in unexpected ways that splotters tend to do.
This is a game where Trey starts taking 5 to 10 minutes thinking about his next move, and then before making a decision starts complaining about how he doesn't have a good move, I don't get annoyed.
How long did Paul take today?
Sympathize. Paul took a long time. Paul actually explained his thinking, which was interesting to listen to. But I like Paul's explaining his thinking anyway. You know, we go on long rides where basically that's what we do, explain our thinking to each other. What is interesting about this philosophy, this aesthetic, these are not guys who are going to do terraforming Mars. These are not guys who are going to do Teotihuacan. Still, my favorite games are games with a strong narrative element, games where there's a lot of real world feeling, that if you know about, buses need gas, buses need fuel, it's more interesting to me. They're not even going to do Barrage, which I think Barrage is kind of an intersection of math and narrative, or math and real world. If you like puzzles, if you like chess, when you play chess, you don't care about knights or kings, or queens. You don't have to care about what Henry IV did or Louis XIV.
Right.
A king is simply a piece that moves a certain way.
But you're more talking about early Splotter, because Food Chain Magnate, I think, is a game that has a lot more. It feels real world. It feels like there's a real world game going on. Greed Incorporated. Did you ever play Greed Incorporated with us?
I think I did, but
yeah,
long enough.
It's got the stock market and all of these sorts of things. And the interesting thing about that game is it's a tremendously, wonderfully cynical game, because no matter how well your corporation does, you don't score any points based on how your corporation does. You only score points when you take your golden parachute and cash out your share of the company.
That's very Dutch.
Tank the company, basically, and buy the luxury items that are available only for people that have cashed out.
I remember that faintly.
Right, very story based. That's a game that tells a tremendously, wonderfully cynical story.
By the way, I don't mean to privilege story based games over AI games, over puzzle games. I'm just simply saying that this bus, to me, is first of all, scratches the itch. If you have that itch. I don't. I'm willing to go through the experience. It's not something I'm going to be seeking out. But these games require and call for player interaction, because that's like really the only unexpected element. That's really the only element that makes this a game and not Sudoku. Whereas in narrative games, the addition of cards, the addition of all these multiple story elements can make player interaction less of a factor. I think that the reason that there's so much parallel play, that there's so much single-player solitaire, is that just as Splotter has been moving away from pure puzzles to more real-world simulation-type games.
Not tremendously, but somewhat, yes.
I think the whole industry has been moving in that direction. They're not moving in that direction perfectly. They may be leaving some player interaction behind. But one of the reasons they're leaving player interaction is because for people like me, non-gamers, new gamers, the narrative takes place of competition.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that the most storytelling games there are, like the hardcore storytelling games, have a ton of player interaction, if not more player interaction than most any other game. So really that doesn't quite fit. It's the low interaction games are actually more gamey and less story for the most part than the games that are telling the biggest stories. For instance, the Dead of Winter, Battlestar Galactica, Robinson Crusoe, all of these games, they're telling a story, but you are competing for resources. You're trying to figure out which one of you is not to be trusted. There's like so much interaction in the game, and cooperative games as well. Cooperative games are very story based. They have to be very story based, or they don't feel very. What are we cooperating on, right? Those rely on the most player interaction you can possibly have, because that's the only way to win the game. So,
but less competition. I'm talking about interactive, competitive interaction.
Sure.
I'm
Well,
not
I mean,
talking.
obviously, cooperative games do not have that.
And then the games like Tapestry, which when I played, it felt like the game was playing me. It was just telling me a story about my civilization, and I was optimizing the decisions it was allowing me to make. But mostly,
you realize that when we have used the term "the game is playing me" before, right? That in the board gaming hobby, when a person says the game played me,
that's not a good thing.
That's not a good thing.
But if the game is telling you a story, it may be a good thing.
Tapestry isn't telling you a story. Come on, it's telling you nothing. It's giving you a little piece to put on your map. It is telling you nothing.
Can we agree that Bus isn't telling any story?
Yes, Bus is not telling any story. That is for sure. Look, here's the other part of that, is that the difference between strategy and tactics. All right, in wargaming, the difference between strategy and tactics is very clear. A strategic level game is the generals in the room deciding, are we going to invade Normandy, or are we going to work our way up the boot of Italy? How are we going to be doing this? The tactical game is the level of game where the captains and the lieutenants are deciding whether or not they are going to go through these hedgerows, or whether they're going to try and take the high ground here over on the left flank of the battlefield, right? Mm-hmm. That's the way that is. When we talk about it in Eurogames, it's similar, but it's a little bit more that strategic games are games in which you are coming up with a long-range strategy that you are going to pursue to win the game.
Bus is very tactical from that point
Precisely
of view.
right. The tactical games are ones in which you are constantly trying to find the best move, and because of the design of the game, it is very hard to be able to do a lot of long-range planning. So you're optimizing turn to turn.
I feel that's why Trey was so frustrated with the game, because he's all about long-term, long-range engine building, and why Jake actually very much liked it.
Yeah. Listen, tactical games, I'm going to give you a list of some of my favorite tactical games. Ricochet Robots.
Sure.
Completely and totally tactical.
And
right?
a puzzle, and an AI. AI will beat me at that game. An AI will beat any human in that game.
But I will say, tactical games, probably if you want to stave off Alzheimer's, there's probably nothing better than a tactical puzzle game
well, you may be talking about general dementia. I think Alzheimer is
both of them.
Physiological ailment.
Same things. The studies have shown that they're doing tremendous amounts to stave off that, because you're rewiring the brain. It's not stopping Alzheimer's from progressing. What you're doing is
adding neural pathways.
Correct. Exactly right.
That makes sense.
So that Samurai is another one. I don't know if you remember that one. That's the one on the beautiful Japanese-looking board where we're putting out the 3 different types of pieces to conquer that. Fresh Fish.
Sure.
Fantastical tactical game. Santiago.
Sure.
Is amazingly. El Grande is a tremendously tactical game. You can't plan too far ahead, because you're just trying to figure out the board state is changing, and you're trying to stay on top of you're going to try to keep balancing on that beach ball. And Bus, tremendously tactical.
I have to say that Bus is also, in addition to all the things that we've said, beautifully balanced.
Yes.
All the scores are very close.
Yes.
To each other. And there wasn't a point where, oh my God, I can't make a move, or I can't do anything.
So I look at balance in a different way in a game like this, because that doesn't tell me it's balanced necessarily. That tells me that everybody played well. Because you could have somebody with a score of 0 and somebody with a score of 10, And it wouldn't mean the game isn't balanced. It just means that one person really knew what they were doing and the other people didn't. When I look at balanced, I mean it in this sense, in the sense that there are 7 actions that you can take in the game, essentially, right? All of them are valid most turns of the game, right? There's not a single action space, including start player, which is very important in this game.
Oh, sure.
There is not a single action space in this game that I would say that, you know what, that's probably the action space I don't need to take much. Every single one situationally can be crucial to your game. In that sense, tremendously balanced. I think the map is very well drawn. I don't think there is there's a sweet spot down here. Don't build out there. That's not so good. It's very well balanced in terms of there being opportunities everywhere.
The artwork is very clean. There's nothing extraneous about it. It's very easy at a glance.
Did I show you the original
Yeah,
version?
you did, and it's very charming and wonderful, including a line of bushes that for some reason keeps track of your score.
That's how you get your score.
Yes, but it's very easy at a glance to tell how many workers somebody has, to tell where you would be, what position you'd be on the track.
Yep.
It's a beautiful, very clean design for a very clean, rich decision space, simple game space game. You know who you are.
Yeah.
If you like this type of stuff.
If you like, in order to buy Bus, in order for you to be interested in Bus, you have to be cool with 2 things. A brain burner of a game that you don't mind staring at a map for 1 to 2 minutes and waiting for other people to do the same thing to try and figure out and calculate out the things that have just happened and how that impacts your board state. You have to be able to do that. And the second thing is, it's a mean game. Your ideal action in a lot of cases is to do things that are going to, like, I am not scoring as many points as these other 2 people, so I am going to do things with my limited actions to lower their score so they don't get too far ahead of me. There's a lot of that.
The game makes up for that by being short.
Yep.
And makes up for that by giving every person a rich decision space.
Yes.
No matter where they are. Tom, would you play this game with a 12-year-old?
Depends on the 12-year-old. I would play this with my kids. I would play it differently with my kids, but I would definitely play it with my kids. And when they start getting mean with me, I would slowly start getting mean with them, if you know what I'm saying.
You let them make the first move.
I would let them discover
First blood. First blood
Exactly.
is yours.
Oh,
then you can go after them.
I play Ricochet Robots with my kids. I play a lot of the games that I just mentioned in the tactical game side. I think it's great because the game can be explained in 5 minutes, like I said, but the depth of discovery that happens in the game, I think really challenges young minds, and I think young minds are particularly good at this. I think they're very good at this.
At the same time, you probably wouldn't want to play Terraforming Mars with a 12-year-old.
No.
Because of the card drafting, because of the complexity
the rules overhead
of the mechanisms and all that. This is a game that kids can play. This is a game that adults can play. It'll burn every brain equally. It will reward every brain that's willing to put in the effort. If this is your cup of tea, you will brew it once a week.
Yeah, if you like the type of game we just described, you're not going to go wrong with Bus. It's amazing. It's frankly a fascinating game and a game worth study. If you do not like any of those aspects, if you don't like games that are very puzzly, if you don't like games that are mean, don't get Bus.
We saved you some money this week.
For some of you, yeah. In terms of the spectrum of Splotter games,
Tom,
this is not.
That was slightly mean.
What?
Well, to say that these games are on the spectrum is a little...
How dare you? I'm not... from the various types of Splotter games, this is not the A group of Splotter. This is a smaller, lighter game than the heavier Splotter stuff. And it's an early design, and it shows that it's an earlier design. So this is not a must. But if this is your kind of game, it's phenomenal.
It has a perfection to it.
Totally agree.